Welcome to episode 159 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing director Michael Lennox about his early days shooting short films in Ireland and how that eventually led to his most recent feature film, a really excellent drama thriller called A Patch of Fog. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 159. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing director Michael Lennox. Here is the interview. Welcome, Michael, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a quick overview of your background, kind of where did you grow up and how did you get involved in the entertainment industry?
I think I grew up in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and I got into film sort of my early 20s, sort of almost by accident. I wasn't very good at school. I wasn't very good at, at anything else. And it was through a film festival called Cinemagic. There were a few filmmakers from England came over to the festival. And I think for me, that was the first time I met anyone who actually liked what they did in terms of what they did for a living, in terms of a job. And I always loved films. So as I sort of slipped in, I sort of, got the bug. And from there, I just started to make my own films, locally on my own for no budget. Then I got in with the local screen agency, Northern Ireland Screen, who funded my first and second short film. And then a bigger break for me is I went to a really good film school in London a few years ago called the National Film and Television School to study directing. And then out of film school, I met Robert Jones, the producer of Patch of Fog, who gave me the opportunity to have a go at my first feature film.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about some of those short films and just kind of dig into those specifics. I recommend short films to a lot of screenwriters, whether they direct them themselves or whether they find a director to work with. Maybe you can talk about some of those early short films. You just mentioned, practically no budget, and then I guess getting into some sort of a film society to get produced. How did you do those first ones? Where did you get the money or even the know-how? I mean, did you literally just write a script and just shoot it on whatever camcorder you had available? Maybe talk about that very first filmed content that you did.
Absolutely. One thing you just mentioned 30 seconds ago was about, your love for short films. I love short films and think that they're really difficult things, to do right, but they are the sort of training ground, especially for me, where I made a massive, amount of mistakes. And just before I continue, a lot of people think short films are a stepping stone to feature films, which I agree with in one sense, but I think they're their own form, their own art form, and I plan to make many more. But about 8-9 years ago, it literally was. I bought a camera off eBay for £200. And then started to make my own films, and it was complete trial and error, and it was with friends. And from doing that, I managed to get into a short film scheme, which Northern Ireland Screen Run, which is they pair an experienced producer with sort of new filmmakers. And I was lucky enough to get funding for a short film I did called Ripping the Preacher, which they give us the equivalent of $15,000 to do that short film, which is the first time, we could pay crew. Mm-hmm. And from there, from doing that film, and I think it was, I did it quite successfully from their point of view. I was able to get more funding from follow-up short films.
Okay. Now, just to get a sense of the scope, how many of these super self-funded short films did you do before you got into this film society?
I had to do 40 of them, and they all came in different forms. As a student, I had a job in Coca-Cola in Northern Ireland, and we had to go out to these events. Basically, I give out free Coke to the people of Northern Ireland, and basically we had to film a record of these events, and I was the sort of only person with a camera. Mm-hmm. So basically that was sort of my training ground of filming people giving out Coke, but it really taught me in terms of how to tell simple stories and in terms of how to edit. And I mentioned earlier on Cinemagic Young People's Film Festival, I got involved with a lot of community short films around Belfast, and that was a chance where we made a film in 3 days, made a film in 5 days in a week. And it really was crossing genre, action, comedy. We made horror films, we made films about the city, we made films about documentary, and some of them were absolutely terrible films. But I think when you do that many and you look back, I think that's when you start to realize certain things that you're actually doing right and understanding why things were wrong. And also I think of, what sort of stuff, do you like personally as a filmmaker? I think for me, you can only find that out by making lots of stuff.
Yeah. So now these Coca-Cola events that you were filming, had someone told you to film them, or just your own initiative? You just started filming them and editing them together. That wasn't part of your official job.
No, it wasn't part of my official job at all. They had this terrible camera, which everyone loathed to take. No one liked to be on camera. Everyone loathed to take video. It seemed a completely pointless exercise of giving someone in the street Coke. So it was just one day I decided I'm going to bring my camera, and I'm actually going to shoot. I think I shot about 3 hours, and the people back at Coke were going, "What's this guy doing?" But I think from then I was sort of labelled as the guy who actually quite enjoyed this stuff. And I think from there, then I bought a PC notebook computer from the earnings at Coke, and then I started to edit a few things together. And then eventually, a year or two down the line, I convinced them to give me a bit of money to do, a few more promotional videos, which went to, health and safety videos at, at the Coca-Cola plant. So basically, it was anything I could get my hands on, to make stuff and to learn.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this film society. You're using a word I'm not familiar with. You're saying like film scheme or something. What exactly? Maybe you can sort of describe what this is. I don't think in the United States we have these sorts of setups quite the same way.
Yeah, I know that's what I find. It's a really, really fortunate, great thing that the sort of UK government, Northern Ireland's part of the UK, do. So there's our main funding body is Northern Ireland Screen, who could make up 20% of funding a big budget. So they're part of big shows like Game of Thrones, for example, is one of their biggest shows. So basically for new filmmakers, which is sort of new filmmakers, first time short film directors, and they ran a scheme called Digital Shorts, which is basically we met up on a Saturday for 4 or 5 months. We developed a script together, and at the end of the process of about 15-20 people, they commissioned 4 short films, with a small budget to be made. So I was lucky enough to be part of that group, and that was sort of my first attempt with a sort of a proper crew to work with and be able to pay people and do stuff at a sort of slightly more complex production level.
Yeah. And maybe this is not something you would necessarily know, but do other European countries have similar setups with these film commissions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Absolutely. Every country is very different. Like I have friends in Austria. I have an art house filmmaker friend in Austria. He must be giving out a lot of money. He gets a massive amount of money to do these sort of crazy art house, films. So it seems that that's a European thing that I think is important to invest in short films and sort of, new filmmakers.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about what were you doing with some of these short films? Once you got started to get some funding and get a little bit of budget, were you submitting them to film festivals? How did you take that next leap? I noticed on your IMDb page, Boogaloo and Graham, like you got an Academy Award nomination. Take us through that process as your career is kind of moving along. How did you get to that stage where you're even getting in contention for an Academy Award nomination?
Yeah, so I made numerous short films with Northern Ireland Screen, and then I moved to London and I went to film school, where I studied directing, and I made 4 or 5 short films. I came out of film school and was actually attached to possibly direct. It was a children's Christmas film, but on my reel, a lot of my short films had sort of been very dark and serious, and I'd never done comedy before. So Northern Ireland Screen give me a bit of money, and I got some private finance, and we made Boogaloo and Graham, which is sort of, it was a comedy about chickens in Northern Ireland in the 70s. So this was in 2015, and yeah, I made that film. I had no expectations it would travel, like it had, but when we finished Boogaloo and Graham, it sort of took a life of its own, and we launched it at Toronto Film Festival, and a couple of months later, we found ourselves in the running, for a BAFTA, and an Oscar. So it's sort of the short film gods were on our side for that.
Did you have some other films before that had gotten into the Toronto Film Festival?
No, the first big film, I'd be at Rippin' the Preacher, which had toured, which did a few film festivals in the UK, and then I made a short film at film school called The Back of Beyond, which it went to Locarno Film Festival, and it screened at quite a number of film festivals, in America. But Boogaloo and Graham is sort of the first short film which sort of attacked the bigger festivals, which screened in Toronto, in Berlin.
Yeah, yeah. So you on your IMDb page, you have a couple credits directing TV episodes. Maybe you can talk about sort of how you got those gigs. In Hollywood, it just seems like you get to a certain level, and then at some point you get an agent and manager, and that's kind of how you get into sort of the studio system, directing TV shows and that kind of stuff. At some point, did you get an agent? But even taking a step back, how did you get those gigs directing those TV episodes?
Yeah, so the first step with that was getting an agent. I got an agent in London, when I was at film school. And the honest answer is, when I came out of film school, nothing happened for a year, 2 years. I came back from London, to Belfast, and had to do sort of more corporate videos to pay off my film school fees. But it was when I got attached, luckily, to direct actually my first feature film, A Patch of Fog. And because of A Patch of Fog, where I could prove I could direct a story of 90 minutes, I think that was the key calling card for the TV guys. So when I finished A Patch of Fog, I think just by nature of doing 90 minutes, my agent was able to get me recently last year a job on a crime show called Endeavour, which is the British equivalent of Columbo, which was a 90-minute TV episode. And later this year I'll be doing another series for Channel 4. So it was the longer form which really sort of broke the back. I think not to ramble on here about the TV game, is I found it extremely hard to even try and break in the door, because even though people were like, you've done this successful short film, we love all your work, but can you do the longer form? Can you tell a story over 30 minutes? And trust seemed to be a massive thing. So the benefit of doing the feature early enabled me to have a good calling card to get into the television game.
Yeah, yeah. So let's dig into A Patch of Fog. To start out, maybe you can give us a quick pitch or log line on what that film is all about.
Basically, A Patch of Fog is about a compulsive shoplifter who is blackmailed by a lonely security guard for not personal financial gain, but all he wants is a friend.
Okay, yeah, that's a good summation. How did you get involved with this project? Maybe just take us back to those early steps. How did you get the script and ultimately get attached as a director?
Brilliant. So again, I'm big up in Northern Ireland Screen here, because they run a scheme called New Talent Focus, which is basically for first-time writers to make a feature film. So basically, John and Michael written, A Patch of Fog, and they attached a producer called Robert Jones, brilliant UK producer. He was one of the producers on The Usual Suspects, and basically they were looking for a Northern Irish, an Irish director, and my name was thrown. I just finished. I'd been a year out of film school, and my name was thrown into the pile. So Robert Jones, interviewed me for the job, and I would have bit his arm off, for it, to work with him. And also, it's a Patch of Fog. I'm a big fan of these sort of buddy movies or thriller movies, such as Misery or Single White Female, and this was a sort of Patch of Fog was a sort of strange twist on that genre. So that what sort of attracted me to the actual story and the script, and very excited to direct that as my first feature.
Yeah. And so I always like to just get a sense of sort of the scope of someone, what they're working on, and what else. And I think a big part of success in this industry is also having some false starts and failures. And I'm curious, were there some other scripts that you got attached to that for whatever reason didn't actually take off? Were you working on multiple projects? Were there other feature films that you were developing?
Yeah, I'm always developing, feature films myself. So I work a lot with a writer called Ronan Blaney, who wrote Boogaloo and Graham. And we had a film we were trying to push, out of film school, which was getting nowhere. In fact, the reason Boogaloo and Graham came into existence is I was attached to direct, I mentioned earlier, a children's Christmas film. And I needed to do Boogaloo as example, and I could direct comedy. But in the first day of production of Boogaloo, they, called and basically said you're fired from the project, for no reason. Yeah. Which was, I was still left to make this short film, which sort of, was sort of great karma. Mm-hmm. Came back and served its purpose. So up until Patch of Fog, it was a continual, search to get funding, and part of the thing, you're trying to get a producer attached to a script, but having a producer attached to a script doesn't necessarily mean the film's gonna get made. So that's why the sort of new talent scheme at Northern Ireland Screen was a massive benefit, because they put in the first chunk of money, mm-hmm. which is sort of that's the big risk. The big risk is who's in first, and that enabled us with Robert Jones and his track record to raise the rest of the finance. So it has been an uphill struggle to get the film just across the line.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had this really good producer on A Patch of Fog, and that was definitely one of the components that made you want to do this movie.
He was the insurance policy, as I call it, because it was the first time. But there were these two crazy writers from Belfast and me, and charge his budget. So we needed sort of a producer, in terms of trying to attract cast and trying to attract even bigger finance. We needed someone with a track record to sort of vouch for me.
Yeah. Now, were there some specific things about the script when you read the script that also attracted you to the project? And really what I'm sort of diving into is just even some just general things when you read scripts. Maybe there's some tips you can give the writers from a director's perspective. Are there some things that you see in scripts that you really like? And again, maybe we can apply them specifically to A Patch of Fog.
I think specifically for A Patch of Fog, okay, here we have this shoplifter, and he gets caught, and he's going to be blackmailed, and sort of what for? Is it, is it for money? Is it some strange fetish? Is it something? No, all he wants is a best mate, a very human thing from this lonely guard. So it was this sort of I don't know, in the pitch it was just sort of this it was a unique concept, and it was a unique character in the security guard, and that sort of I think that sort of twisted nature of the story just sort of it grew on me of what type of person this would be. So for me in scripts it's the premise, and then it's the main characters, and what do they want, what sort of attracts me to your project. I'm also very interested in extreme characters, people who don't fit the norm. So Robert, who plays the security guard in Patch of Fog, played by Stephen Graham, he's this really quirky guy, socially, and he's not liked by the people of his work. but he has a sort of different set of, smarts which help him outsmart Sandy, who plays the shoplifter. So it's sort of these sort of extremes, not the norm people, would sort of catch my eye, for some reason.
Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side of that, is there some things when you read scripts that you see screenwriters make mistakes, just some common problems that you run into scripts, which gives you real cause for concern when you're reading a script?
Yeah, I think part of the problem, the thing is with the screenplays. I mean, sort of in the actual term screenplay, they're meant to be seen on screen. So some scripts read very well, on the page. But what I'm sort of looking for is when writers write scene, you can sort of see the potential on the page, for the screen. And a lot of the time when I'm working on scripts, and even in my own scripts, it's just like these sequences on screen, they don't seem interesting enough. Do you know what I mean? They don't seem bold enough. Ultimately, we're watching what is it visually, can make this interesting from the scenes and, and from the premise. So it's something, I continue to struggle with. And also, when I read screenplays, it's ultimately trying to always think this is going to appear, on the screen. Let's think of the scenes in terms of images. Now, I know that's ultimately a director's job, but I think when a writer can be in tuned into visual writing to catch, the imagination, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So let's just talk a minute about. You mentioned these great actors, Stephen Graham and Connolly Hill, that you had in this movie. At what stage did they come on board? And maybe you can just talk a little bit about how they got attached.
Well, actually, we went through a long casting process, which basically is when you have a low budget film, naturally big name cast sort of help maybe the sales and where the film's going to be seen. So we spent quite a while trying to get a high level of cast. We got some interest, but that mainly didn't materialize. So it was a few months before filming, and Stephen Graham he's one of my favorite actors in the UK, and he just a couple of weeks before filming, we had auditioned some guys, and I just wasn't sure would specifically nailed it. It was coming up to the wire, and it was just one of them gifts. Stephen Graham became free. The casting director said that could we send it to Stephen, and I didn't hope for anything, but Stephen read it that day, and a day later, we got on the phone, and he was, I'd love to play this character, and that's how Stephen got involved. Conleth is he's a big actor over here, and him from Lord Varys from Game of Thrones. But he's always an actor, I admired locally, and so it was a dream that he became involved. And he's sort of not the conventional leading man, and I think that's sort of his particular look and playing against the sort of normal type that one may have for this character. That's what sort of interests me about him, and the buddy nature of his relationship on screen with Stephen.
Yeah. So do you know what the release schedule is going to be for A Patch of Fog? How can people see it?
So we had a limited release, in the UK, and then over the next, I think at the end of January, don't have a specific date, it will go on a number of on-demand platforms and iTunes, and it will eventually, end up on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. And I'd just like to wrap up the interviews by asking the guest how people can follow along with what you're doing. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, a blog, website, anything you're comfortable sharing, you can give us that now, and I will round it up and link to it in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. I'm on Facebook. It's just Michael Lennox, and on Twitter it is Carson Lennox. So I'm on that quite a bit, so easily contactable.
Perfect. Michael, I really appreciate this excellent film, and I really wish you luck with it.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening to me ramble on.
No, it was very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you much. We'll talk to you later.
Take it easy. Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis service to an analysis of your script, or you can simply buy the logline and synopsis service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing screenwriter and director Alexander Babiev. He just did a film called The Bornless Ones. We talked through his early days as a student, as a film student, and how that eventually led to his first feature film, which, as I said, he wrote and directed. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Michael. One of the biggest things that I feel like new writers don't quite understand is the amount of effort that it takes to make it in this business. You know, I get a lot of emails from writers. They've written 1, 2, maybe 3 scripts. You know, they've submitted to a few contests, and, you know, they're kind of like, gee, what should I do next? And they kind of think that that is the amount of effort that it takes to break into this business. Really listen to what Michael just said, and I think it was just so telling. You know, he said he did like 30, 40 short films on his own, just no budget, just went out and shot 30 or 40 short films. I'm sure it took him a couple of years to do that, but the bottom line, he was just making a ton of short films before he got into this film society that he was talking about. So, I mean, that's a lot of legwork, and that's just a lot of effort that he was out there putting in. He was also doing short videos through his job, even though his job wasn't officially shooting videos. I think that's worth listening to. I wonder how many people listen to this podcast have a 9-to-5 job where they could potentially do something like that. I mean, you know, maybe there's a Christmas party that you could just shoot and edit and turn into a video. Maybe there's some event at your company that you could go to your manager or your boss and just say, hey, could I bring my video camera? Could I shoot this? Maybe there's ways of just starting to implement storytelling into your regular 9-to-5 job. And getting this actual production experience is just such a great, relevant experience for you as a screenwriter. Helps you as a writer, helps you as a storyteller. I can tell my own writing has gotten a lot better just this process through the pinch. I mean, I've been doing this for many, many years as a screenwriter. I've written and sold and had many of my scripts produced, but going through the process as a director and as a producer is really just a totally different experience. And I can tell I'm lacking a lot of that sort of practical production experience that, you know, that Michael had, and watching his film, you can see it. His film is really excellent. I mean, it's really well done. And I'm sitting here wondering, how can I get a lot more practical production experience? If I want to continue to be a writer director, I need to get that experience as quickly as possible. And I'm thinking maybe I should go out and do shorts. Maybe I should just keep churning out these low budget features just to try and get that experience. But the bottom line is we all need that practical production experience. It's just so helpful as a writer. And next week's interview with Alexander Babiev, he is another prime example of exactly what I'm talking about. He worked just on tons of his friends were doing shorts, and he would just work on his shorts as a first AD. I mean, not even a writer, director, or anything else. He was just out there doing production stuff. He did a bunch of shorts on his own, and that's kind of how it all led to the feature film. And again, I'm gonna talk to him next week. And it's a really well shot and well produced film. You can see in his film sort of the years of experience that he has. And the script is good as well. So just having that practical production experience, I think it can just really inform your writing, and it can really help you sort of visualize things and understand, how things are going to fit together, and understand what things are difficult to shoot and what things simply can't be shot. There's a lot of parts to the pinch when I originally wrote it that had to be modified, and that's just part of the practical aspect of film production. Is you can't always shoot things, and understanding that and going through that process is just so important, and it can make you a better writer and can help you get your vision onto the screen. I mean, as a writer, if you write something that can't be shot, or can't be shot easily, or can't be shot on the budget that the producer has, and if you don't understand that, then someone else has to make those changes. Someone else has to rewrite those pages, and a lot of times it's on the fly. It's as they're shooting. They can't quite get as much coverage as they need to make your scene work. And if you understand that, you can write these things in a concise manner and understand what's going to be difficult, and that can sort of rely on you as the writer, as opposed to just writing a script and letting other people, the line producer and the first AD and everybody else, sort of taking whacks at it because it's not shootable for the budget that they have. Anyways, that's the show for this week. Thank you for listening.